All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Productivity Show. My name is Brooks. I'm from Asian Efficiency, where we help people become more productive at work and at life. And Marmel, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Marmel. I am the Scrum Master for Asian Efficiency. So basically what I do is to make sure that the team finishes all the tasks that we have every single sprint or every 2 weeks.
And she does a very good job at that. She is very nicely, but very firmly checks in with us and calls us out when we are not moving as quickly as we should be. So she does a very good job, but she's also very positive. So today we are going to be talking about mental blocks, overcoming mental blocks. This is one of those topics that I'm going to guess that is going to get really personal really quickly. We'll see how it goes. So hold on to that. I know it's something all of us struggle with in some ways, so we're going to get right into that. But like we start every single episode with, we're going to share our top 3 resources. So these are things that we are loving lately that are making us more productive. But this time we thought we would switch it up a little bit and also share resources that are recommended by our community, the dojo. The first one is from me though, and it is the Club Spore pillow from IKEA. I massacred that pronunciation despite the fact that I am part Swedish. And that is an ergonomic pillow, and I really like it. It's what I've been using for probably the last 6 months or so. It's a memory foam pillow, but it also has a gel side. So if you are somebody who feels hot when you sleep, you can have it on the gel side and you get this cooling gel, or you can flip it over and have a more firm memory foam experience as well. So I really enjoy this pillow. So if you're needing a new pillow, check it out. It's about I think $50 US, something like that. The second is recommended by William and a number of other members of the dojo. It's called Miro, which is a collaborative whiteboard platform for remote and distributed teams. A lot of us are working remotely, whether on purpose or because we're forced to. And Miro is a great platform that a lot of our dojo members love for collaborating, marking up ideas, and just working together. So that's Miro. And third, also from the dojo, from Giacomo in the dojo, is the BenQ screen bar. So it's an auto dimming desk lamp. It's got an ambient light sensor, so you can just hang it on your monitor and it lights up your desk without taking up any space. So I thought that was a really cool concept as well. So as usual, we're going to have links to everything that we talk about in the show at theproductivityshow.com/321. We'll have links to everybody. So we're going to be talking about overcoming mental blocks. You ready, Marmel?
Yep, ready?
So if you are somebody like many of us who just feels like you can't get out of your own head and find it hard to get started, then this episode will be for you. If you're able to get started, but then as you go through it, you're just plagued by self-doubt. Maybe you're feeling that it isn't whatever you're doing isn't good enough, or whatever it is that your mental block is, if it slows you down, we're going to be talking about that. And also, if you find yourself overcommitting all the time and then having to dig yourself out of a productivity hole, that is a mental block as well. So we're going to be talking about that. This episode is going to cover all of these things. I know a lot of us struggle with this, as I said. Just want to give a shout out to podcast listeners who joined our TPS Plus. That's our new premium productivity podcast, or version of the productivity show, I should say. You get episodes 1 week early and without any ads. We introduced it a couple weeks ago. It's been really popular, so we're really thankful for that. One interesting thing for me that I'm very surprised about is that a lot more people than I expected have signed up for the annual plan. So I guess that 1 tweak a week t-shirt that is available only for annual members, I guess that, I don't know if that's the deciding factor, but I know a lot of people have been signing up for the annual plan. So if you're interested, go to tps.plus. All right, mental blocks. Marmel, do you have any mental blocks? It's a yes, no
I would
question.
say yes. Yes.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah, nothing to ashamed of.
No, of course not. So much productivity advice focuses on like external factors like apps and tools and workflows. In our opinion, not enough attention is paid to internal factors. So these are things that like sleep, we've talked about a lot on the podcast, but there's also what we call mental factors or mental blocks. These are these internal issues where we get into our own head and end up getting stuck. Even if we have everything else good, even if we have our calendar nailed down, even if we're healthy, even if we're theoretically should be focused, we can still go off track. We're going to give some examples of mental blocks that you may be experiencing and not even know it. And we're also going to give some strategies that will help you get around these mental blocks and even use them to your advantage. Marmel, you gave a yes to my yes/no question earlier, so I'm going to assume that you do feel that a mental block is a part of your life. Do you have any examples that you want to share of maybe mental blocks that you've experienced?
Yeah, so this topic is pretty close to my heart just because I live with anxiety, and this is something that a lot of the dojo members know as well. And I say live with and not suffer, just because it is true that I suffer from anxiety. I don't want to be held by that or dwell on that. So no, I am what they call high functioning despite of. So I would say that there are times that it's a bit easier, but there are times when my mental block is really just my brain just being too loud, that I cannot think straight. But being in Asian efficiency has helped a lot just because the systems and the courses that we have helps ground me and ground myself. So um I've seen a lot of improvement in my life, the past 5 6 years that I've been with Asian efficiency. And if I compare myself before to now, I wouldn't probably um recognize myself because I because I'm able to work through the mental blocks that I experience.
Yeah, we always share the what we're any courses or learnings that we have. That's a big part of our weekly meetings, and often Marmela is sharing AE courses she's gone through, or different trainings that we've done that she's gone through. So Marmela is one of our biggest customers. No, that thank you for sharing that, Marmel. That's super awesome. And yeah, I'm really glad you made the point of living with or working with versus suffering from. A lot of it is a lot of these mental blocks that we're going to be talking about today is something that really can benefit from a reframe and how we think about these things, and just make them part of the things we need to do as we're moving through. Like for me, uh, so many mental blocks I could talk about, but an example for me is in my corporate days, I had many opportunities to move into different roles or bigger projects, maybe move to some different offices. But I just in a lot of cases I just found myself playing it safe, like not taking, when I look back now, not taking advantage of many of the opportunities that I could have. And it wasn't anything to do other than my mental block and the way that I was thinking about things. I almost kept getting promoted in spite of myself, to be totally honest. And there, could have moved even faster had I known about a lot of this stuff. So it's great. Like what we learn about, what we can describe is something we can then deal with and work with. So being aware of the mental blocks that you have is one step to being able to get around them if that's something that you choose to do. So some of our dojo members, we record these live with our dojo and our TPS Plus members, and some people have been sharing some of their mental blocks. Some people say they put off things and tasks and projects that they don't enjoy. Yeah, that a lot of us do that. Sometimes just getting started, this like we have everything ready to go, all of the time, energy, attention, all of that is good to go, but it's those mental blocks. I guess you could count that as part of the attention that trips us up. So we wanted to share some common types of mental blocks. I would be really curious if you're listening to this. Think to yourself as I'm going through this list and giving some of these examples, if any of these resonate with you, if you recognize yourself in any of these. So the first one is self-doubt. This is when you feel like, I just never feel qualified, like no matter how qualified I am. Some people call it imposter syndrome. So even though you got the job, even though you were given the assignment, even though all your coworkers look up to you, whether you believe it or not, we still struggle from this self-doubt. So that's the first one, self-doubt. The second one is indecision. So you feel like you just have to optimize every decision or it's all going to fall apart. So you over research every decision. You don't even get into what your priorities are because you just feel like you have to always over research and make the right choice before you even get started knowing what to focus your time on. It's like you don't trust yourself to identify what's important. A tool that can help with this, like there are lots of tools that can help with this. We talked about one recently, TPS321, the ICE matrix, which can help with prioritization and kind of take it out of our own head. But it is definitely something, indecision, that a lot of us struggle with. We have some people mentioning that they say they're an imposter guy. Yeah, a lot of us will resonate with these things. The third common type of mental block is a fixed mindset. So, you feel like you're limited by your past self. And this fixed mindset will keep you from growing. And then you accept limits that are below your actual capabilities. And we don't explore what our additional capabilities are because we always play it safe. Like I was talking about earlier, I wish I knew more about fixed mindset back in my corporate days because it really would have helped me a lot. We actually talked about this a lot in TPS121. We called it change your mind, change your life, and how a growth mindset leads you to your ideal future. So if fixed mindset is something that you feel like you may identify with, you can check out that podcast. The fourth is comparison. So always comparing ourselves to other people. You almost feel like, even if we admit it or not, you almost feel like other people's success takes away from ours. And it's so easy to view other people's success as a threat. It makes it so you're always focusing on others instead of your own growth. And this is something that I have definitely experienced, again, more in my corporate career than now, but it's something that is so hard not to compare yourself to other people in your same company, in your same industry. You go to a conference and you just can't help it. And that is definitely a mental block. Number 5 is uncertainty. So you think you know what you want. So it's not quite indecision, like you think you know what you want, but you never can actually move forward. So you make a decision, but you can't figure out how to carry it out. This is where decision fatigue can really come into play as well. And we have a blog post that we'll link to in the show notes called How to Beat Decision Fatigue, the Ultimate Guide. And it's also something we've talked about on the podcast recently as well. So just this over researching. The sixth mental block is no limits. So you feel like that you can do anything, which doesn't sound like or it sounds like weird for a mental block, but it really is, because if you're just way too overconfident on what you can do, you end up way overcommitting and over researching possibilities. You can't make real progress on anything, and what ends up happening is you lead to a bunch of dead ends, or you're making slow progress on a bunch of different things instead of really focusing on one particular thing. And the final type of mental block is tunnel vision. So tunnel vision, kind of similar to fixed mindset in a way, but it's when you're locked into your own perspective. It's kind of like fixed mindset, like I said, but it's more kind of tactical. When you're dealing with a problem, you only see the ways that you know how to do something. You don't explore and look into other things. We just had this conversation in a meeting today at AE where we were talking about how we do a certain workflow, and it's almost human nature that your first instinct is that, well, this is just how we've done it, so this is how it is. And it's so hard to break out of that, and that is a significant mental block as well that a lot of us don't think about. So Marmela, that was quite a list. I'm not going to ask you to identify with all of them, but maybe just pick out one. If there is any, maybe not. Are there any of these that you kind of identify with that you've struggled with?
Self-doubt is definitely at the top of my list. So even until now, I still have moments where I second guess myself, and I would stop myself like from submitting my work to be reviewed because in my head, it's not good enough. Like it's just stuck there that I'm not good enough. I don't have the skills yet to finish it, even if it's a task that I did before already. So self-doubt is definitely there.
Yeah, it's something I'm sure she wouldn't mind me sharing. She doesn't listen to the podcast, so that's okay. But this is something that my wife uh, really struggles with as well. She's way smarter than I am, very accomplished in her career. She's a director level, but half of my day is spent talking about the self-doubt thing. And a lot of us, you never know what somebody's going through. Somebody who seems like very confident, very accomplished, we look at those people, we think they're amazing, but you never know what's kind of behind the curtain. And self-doubt is something a lot of us really, really struggle with. For me, I identify with a number of these, but since I limited it to just one, for me, I definitely have struggled with uncertainty. So I can go down these huge rabbit holes trying to figure out the best way to do something versus just like getting it done and moving on. This is especially true if it's a technical issue. These can be like kryptonite for me, not because I don't know how to do them, but it's almost the opposite. Because I know how to do so many technical things, that I can go on these really deep rabbit holes trying to decide what the optimal way to do something is, which a little bit of that is good, which we're going to talk about, but too much of it you can eat up a whole day working on a particular problem that really only needed to take an hour or two. So those are the seven common types of mental blocks. I'll just repeat them for those who maybe wanted to jot them down. Number one, self-doubt. Number two, indecision. Number three, fixed mindset. Number four, comparison. Number five, uncertainty. Number six, no limits. And number seven, tunnel vision. And by the way, just to throw this in there, members of TPS Plus, so that's TPS.plus, actually have access to our behind the scenes show notes. So if that's something that might be interested to you, you can check that out at TPS.plus. So Marmel, maybe listeners have gone through this list and identified with one or more. I know as I was reading them, I myself was reading them, like sparks were going off in my head. Maybe you were the same. But maybe some people aren't really sure what kind of mental blocks they have, if any. And if you don't have any, that's awesome. Unlikely, but good for you if that's the case. How do you know if it's not totally screaming obvious? How do you know what kind of mental blocks you have, and which then you can use to deal with it?
I was going to say easy, but I think the better term is doable. It's very doable. And I refuse to believe that I'm the only one who talks to myself, because I know Brooks does it too. But one thing that you can do to know what type of mental blocks you have, because I have more than one, is just to listen to yourself. Every time you find yourself slacking off or procrastinating, you're doing something else instead of doing the task at hand. Listen to your internal monologue. Like, if you need to jot it down, jot it down. If your brain is too noisy that you cannot make out what you're trying to tell yourself, meditate, because meditation helps a lot. And we discussed this in TPS 210, meditation for the rest of us. Or if you're like me, if my brain's too noisy and I can't talk to myself and really listen, I go for a run. It's weird, but it works for me. Then after that, I can meditate, and then I can listen to myself more, and then I jot things down.
Yeah, exercise can be a really helpful strategy. For me, I like, as I've mentioned on the podcast before, I like going for walks every morning. Currently, the Pacific Northwest is on fire. And as we record this, Vancouver has the second worst air quality in the world. So I can't go for walks in my morning walks, and it's driving me crazy. I get very grumpy when I can't do it. Uh, so some mental blocks that people in the live stream, I usually share names with feedback, but I don't want to, I'm going to keep people anonymous for this case. Some people say that comparison is the death of joy. That's something they struggle with. That's very true. Another one says that indecision or no limits are a big mental block for them. Very common. And then some people say it's that gut feeling you get when you approach a task or project, and that's like a mental block as well. You go to start doing something, and you just feel like you have this, even if it ends up being easy, you just have this kind of like kind of bad feeling that that holds us back. But that's what we're here to help deal with. And so we have 4 strategies to overcome mental blocks. And you may not use all of these strategies. Maybe just one will do the trick for you, and not all 4 will work, will be applicable in every scenario. But if you have these 4 strategies, then you can use them to apply as needed. And strategy number 1 is to uncover the causes of the mental block. This one can be a little deep, but it is really, really powerful. Mental blocks usually don't happen in a vacuum. They're usually a natural outgrowth of our personalities, or something that's happened to us in the past, in our work, in our personal life, like or just the way we're raised. Like, these mental blocks don't come from nowhere. Like, for example, part of it is related to, we're big fans of the Kolbe score here at Agent Efficiency. And when we're hiring somebody, they always take the Kolbe test, so that not so much as a way to weed people out, but more as a way to learn how we will work together. And a Kolbe score, which we talked about in TPS321, which is a podcast episode we talked about with the David Kolbe, from the creator of the Kolbe score, that can really help with this. But the idea is to kind of get to the root cause of where do we think this mental block came from? Like, for myself, I'm pretty sure that this uncertainty mental block for me, where I have to overanalyze anything, is partially because I'm at high fact finder in my Kolbe score. So that's something that I know about myself. Also because I've been using technology for a very, very, very long time, since the, I guess you'd say, early to mid 80s. And in the early days of computer technology, at least the early days for me, you had to figure out everything. There were no like easy ways to do things. You had to do a lot of research and analysis in order to figure out the best way to do something. So that's just something that has carried on for me, is I've had to, or I felt like I always have to do these deep dives, when often the first solution you find is very often the best. That's an example for me, but really what you want to do is you want to ask that question, why? Like, why do I think this way? How about you, Marmel? Do you ever go do this why exercise for dealing with your mental blocks?
I did this, especially for for self doubt, because I don't recall when I was a kid having this kind of personality or having this kind of mental block. But I have a story for this. So when I was still in the corporate world, I handled an account that made me second guess my skills. Despite of the training that I had, I was sent to the US to be trained, mentored by great people. So I was there for less than 2 years just because I couldn't take how the company would normalize swearing and just demeaning someone. So I was young and naive, and because of that practice, I just started to self doubt, and I I realized that during the why exercise, like what really led me to doubting myself. So I was a youngest manager, and if there was anything wrong that would happen, it would always fell on me to take accountability. And so I dreaded being in daily meetings, because if there's something wrong, then it's going to be my fault. And looking back, like, why did I leave any sooner? And then I just chalk it off like I was just too young and naive, and I wanted to prove myself. But I feel like having um post-traumatic stress syndrome because of that experience, but the outcome is really just doubting myself a lot.
Thank you for sharing that story. And yeah, it's amazing how impactful those early work, like leaving aside things in our background of our personal life, but it's amazing how impactful, both good and bad, those early work experiences can be, and how they can shape how we carry these things forward. And the reason we want to ask why for these mental blocks is not to drag all this up. Like, I'm sure you didn't enjoy thinking about that story. Thank you for doing that, but I'm sure that's not something you prefer to go around every day thinking about. However, by strategically revisiting those stories and asking those why questions, then we have something to work with, and then we can look how we can get past those things once we've identified them. So that's number one, uncover the causes. And then number two is, when possible, remove the blocks. And we're not talking necessarily about like solving everything in one shot here, but what you want to do is be aware of when you think of these things that contribute to your blocks, and ideally capture them. So, and then this is kind of tied in with number one, but what you want to do is, when you have those, Marmel talked earlier about having this, like a way to identify blocks is to pay attention to our internal monologue, which we all have. And Marmel correctly said that she's been on enough Zoom calls with me that my internal monologue doesn't tend to be too internal. um, uh, but so, we talked about paying attention to that internal monologue. So then what you want to do is you want to capture that. So get it down on paper, and then go back to that source of where this is coming from. Where did I first hear this? It could go back to childhood, and this is something we talked about in step number one, in strategy number one. But then you're going to take this a step further, and then require evidence of this internal monologue that you're telling yourself, and then you can have something to deal with. So for example, let's say your internal monologue is, I always freeze up in meetings. Like, I'm in a meeting, I have good ideas, I disagree with something this other person says, or I want to pitch an idea, but every time I'm in a meeting, I freeze up. I know a lot of people feel that way. So that's your internal monologue. I always freeze up in meetings. Okay, what were some times that you did freeze up? Why do you think that happened? Were you, and this is going back to your story you talked about earlier, like, do you freeze up in meetings because 3 jobs ago, some jackass coworker, sorry, I don't know if this loses our clean tag, some coworker or boss or something like that shot you down and told you to keep quiet? And was that experience so traumatic that you now think to yourself that you freeze up in meetings because that happened? So when you do that, then you realize, wait a second, this behavior that I'm internalized, that I freeze up in meetings, it was because of that person 3 jobs ago and those bad experiences. Okay, is that person still in the company? Is that person sitting here in these meetings that I feel like I always freeze up in it? Is it really true that I always freeze up in meetings? By asking these questions, then you can realize maybe the blocks that I think are there are no longer applicable, and then you can have a path to work forward. Like for me, my internal monologue, if I'm being honest, with this uncertainty that I was talking about earlier, really what it's saying is, like, what if there's a better way? This technological challenge that I'm working on, and I have some solution theoretically, but it's causing me to slow down because I have this uncertainty. What I'm really saying is, what if there's a better way? I have this solution, but what if there's a better way? Now that I know that I'm asking myself this question, then I can respond with, well, okay, what would this theoretical better way get us? Is it going to get us any further, any faster? Possibly not. So maybe it's just better to roll with the simplest solution that will get the job done instead of spending all this time researching.
My internal monologue is really like when I'm stuck in the self-doubt phase, and like I don't want to put in my work, or like I don't want to speak up because, what if my idea is stupid, right? what if Tan says that we should not do it, like, Marmel, you're not making sense, those what ifs. And then I just tell myself, you know what? It's okay. Even if Tan says or Brooke says that we cannot work on your idea, it's okay. And because because they do it in such a nice way as well, right? So before uncovering this, or in my previous company, it was always like, okay, I cannot speak up, because if I speak up, then I say something wrong, then it's going to be really bad for me. So I would just stop myself from talking. And and Brooks knows this, like, I'm very talkative. So imagine me being very silent. So yeah, so when I start the self doubt, I tell myself, it's not true. If I start telling myself that it's not good enough, I'm not good enough, the other side of me would just say, it's not true.
Yeah, that question of it's not true and it's going to be okay. Those are really really powerful because a lot of times that internal monologue, like we just talked about, once we actually examine those things that we're telling ourselves, then we find out it's not necessarily the case at all. One of our dojo members shares a good reframe for this is what we really need is a good response to our own inner dialogue, and yeah, that's a really great way to put it. All right, strategy number 3 is to reduce their power. And this is kind of funny. Mental blocks aren't all bad all the time. Sometimes we don't necessarily need to get rid of it. It's just lowering it down a little bit. It's not letting it have such an outsized impact on our work. So, for example, like for me, like a healthy dose of uncertainty, if I was to say, I don't want to have uncertainty anymore, well, what's the flip side of that? Oh, just always go with the first thing that comes to mind, which in some cases is true. But, a healthy dose of uncertainty can really help you avoid making impulsive and inconsiderate and bad decisions. So sometimes we don't, like I said, we don't want to eliminate them. We just want to like turn the heat down a little bit. Also, many, and this is a perfect example of what you just said, Marmel, is many mental blocks come from fear. It's a fear of what will happen if we do something. Tim Ferriss, I know, talks about this a lot, this concept of fear setting, which is envisioning what would actually happen if all the negative things we are worried about actually came true, actually happened. So in your example that you just gave of, or in the theoretical person I gave example of being afraid to speak in a meeting, okay, what is going all the logical solution? What would really happen if that person who freezes up in meetings actually spoke? Well, they might think, well, I might not look smart. I may get my idea shut down. Okay, so then what would happen? Probably not much. What would really happen probably is I would stew about it and feel bad about it, and everybody else would forget about it 30 seconds later and go on with the rest of the thing. The person is not going to get fired. The person is like none of the. If you really think of the end state for this thing you're afraid of, chances are nothing really bad is going to happen, and then you have something to work with. So you can do the same thing once you've identified your blocks and have that evidence. Look at the fear behind it. What would happen if that fear would come true? And knowing that will help reduce that power. Is that something that does that resonate with you, Marmel? Like when you were talking about your examples, is that something that that has been helpful for you?
Yeah, reducing the power of the mental blocks would really help out, because you just think about, okay, so let's just be honest with ourselves. What are the risks that are at stake? So, for example, and this is true to life story. Every time I write for Asian Efficiency, whether it's a newsletter or the blog, I hesitate to submit it for review to Tan because of that mental block. So I have to reduce that power, because if I don't, then I end up not submitting my work at all. So I think about, what's the worst that could happen if it's not the best written job that I have done, versus probably to redo my work. That's not really bad. Or something else, maybe we won't be able to complete the sprint 100%, that I have to do it the next sprint, but that's not really the, the end of the world. And I'm pretty sure, and I know Tan is going to I know Tan is going to give me feedback, but when Tan gives me feedback, or when Brooks gives me feedback, that's actually a win for me. So by reducing the power of my mental block, I'm able to, to move forward by just thinking about, what the real risks are.
I'm going to share something I do, which I don't think I've ever actually told anyone before. And it's so ridiculous. Like, it is so, so, so ridiculous, but it actually works really well for me. So, and this all started a long time ago, a number of years ago, or not a long time, but a number of years ago. It was before I joined Asian Efficiency. It was a bunch of stuff going on in personal life. It was really, really tough time, to the point where some days I wouldn't even like get anything done during the day. I'd like spend all day lying on my sofa, which is the problem when you're working from home, because you can get away with that stuff. If you work at an office, you can't get away with that stuff. But when you work at home alone, you can. And it was just like, anyway, it was a whole thing. I came up with this really dumb coping strategy. And we call it like the not right now strategy. But basically, what I do is, and I still do it to this day to a lesser extent, when I feel a mental block coming on, when I feel myself about to like obsess over something, think about something, have that self doubt, get like depressed about something, but it's not anything that impacts what I'm doing right now. It's something that could potentially derail it. I for those who are our Dojo and TPS members, plus members who are watching this live, are the only ones who'll be able to see this. I have this hand motion, and I basically go like this. That's it. I just go like, I know this is great audio, but my hand is like just going to the side, like I'm sweeping something away. And I started doing that at that time. So whenever this thing is coming on, I just make that sweeping hand motion, as if like, get out of here. I can't deal with you. I'm not going to deal with you right now. And just that, it's so dumb, but it's so for me anyway, it's so effective. Now, you're not actually solving whatever it is the problem is. You're not solving it. However, you are stopping it from derailing what you should be doing now. And that's been, that brushing aside gesture has been so powerful for me. And I actually read or listened to an audiobook kind of similar in a way, called The 5 Second Rule by Mel Robbins. We'll link to it in the show notes, where she has a similar kind of strategy, it turns out, where basically when you have this happening, what you do is you count down backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you take some sort of action that moves you forward. And it's just that act of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, helps you get around that mental block to get started. And as we all know, a lot of times once you start moving, then it's fine. It's that getting started. So for me, it's a stupid hand brushing motion. For Mel, it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Think if there's something that works for you, because I swear this is a ridiculous strategy, but at least for me, it's effective.
I use the 5 4 3 2 1 when it's really hard for me to get off the bed. Like, okay, 5 4 3 2 1, and then I'm up. Okay, so I'm ready to start the day.
All right. So our 3 strategies so far have been uncover the causes, remove the blocks, reduce their power. Marmel, why don't you share the fourth strategy?
So the fourth strategy is transforming, the block. So when you experience a block, you convert or transform this into something that can be beneficial for you. So like the negative to a positive. So you can transform whatever negative emotion or energy you have into a positive one. So when you notice a bad habit forming, you transform it into something good. For example, you tend to compare yourself to other people, and you always feel, you end up feeling very bad about yourself. So transform it into a better habit. Write it down, like, how can you reach that person's abilities? Because usually when we compare ourselves, we always feel like that person is better. So what makes them better? What can you do to reach that level? How about you, Brooks?
Yeah, for me, I aside from my brushing aside gesture that we've already talked about, uh, that apparently I've never told anybody about except for tens of thousands of my closest friends here on the Productivity Show. Uh, I've used that and a combination of kind of like reduce their power strategy combined with my uncertainty mental block as a way to transform it. So when we're doing something, I can always dip into that uncertainty mental block to at least do a double check or a brainstorming exercise. An example I had with that recently is we had a project and I needed to figure out a technical solution, and it was something that it seemed like there was no way to do it. And I had kind of accepted that there was no way to do it, but I just thought, okay, well, I'm just going to dip into this. This tendency that I have, and then let it germinate for a while. And then I came up with an idea, which ended up working really well. So if I had just gone with the first solution, which is there is no solution, that would have been totally fine. And I had kind of accepted that. But just having that a little bit of the uncertainty mental block has always served me really well in coming up with creative solutions. And that's like you said, a lot of our mental blocks can be a positive if we do a reframe and are able to spin it around. How about you? Have you managed to turn it into a positive?
um what I do right now is that I actually notice myself reviewing my work more. So reviewing it more thoroughly. So aside from just, telling myself, okay, I cannot submit it now, but you know what, here's what I can do. I can go through my work again and make sure that I got all the bases covered. And then at least for me, I know at the back of my head that I have done what I could do. Like, and part of it is reviewing my work.
All right, so those are our 4 strategies to overcome mental blocks. Number 1, uncover the causes. So ask that why question, like why does this mental block even exist? Number 2, remove the blocks. So look for evidence, look at your internal monologue, see if your why, if it's still even there. Number 3, reduce the power. So not necessarily get rid of it altogether, but maybe turn down the heat a little bit. And then number 4, transform the block. So look for a way that you can take that mental block and reframe it and turn it into a positive, something that can actually serve you where appropriate. Acknowledging that mental block is the first step in overcoming it. So for action steps, we always like to end with action steps. Number 1, like I said, acknowledge the mental block, find some sort of action that you can take when your mental block starts slowing you down. So identify it and see if there's a way that you can turn it into a way to take action instead of a way that is taking action away from you. And if you want to check out the show notes, links to the books and the resources that we've talked about in this episode, go to theproductivityshow.com/321. Thank you so much for being here, Marmel.
Thank you for having me.